I'm going to play you some audio. You need to know what's going on here. Just if you have kids around, it's actually not terrible. It's erotic fan fiction, Harry Potter style.
Went looking for some prefects in the bathroom one day, but instead I found Harry, and so I said, hey. I helped him solve the mystery of the A, and I'd like to solve the mystery between his legs. I hope that Harry drowns tomorrow in the lake, so that our honeymoon we can take. Know that ghosts have working anatomy, but what's better than that, we don't get STDs.
Yes, that, my friends, erotic fan fiction for Harry Potter, who in this book, you should know, in this particular book, The Goblet of Fire, I've read it. He is 14 years old. This is a song being sung by a woman who wants to have sex with a 14-year-old fictional boy. That woman is Nita Jankowicz, who Joe Biden has just put in charge of the disinformation office at the Department of Homeland Security. That's right. This is the same woman. She will be in charge of the Disinformation Governance Board of the Department of Homeland Security, overseeing disinformation in the United States of America. Nita Jankowicz also believed that the Hunter Biden laptop, look, I'm trying to move on because it's kind of disturbing, is it not? She wanted to have sexual relations with a 14-year-old boy, fictional boy no less, and she and a friend of hers started this. Now, they were in college, you should know, at the time, just for perspective. They were in college, and they started a duo that sang fan fiction songs about Harry Potter. I got nothing, y'all. I'm sorry. I got nothing. This is the woman in charge of disinformation now. She thought the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation because the experts said so. So if the experts said it, it must be so. The experts have been getting a lot wrong these days. And she also believed the Christopher Steele dossier was true. She believed Christopher Steele's dossier was true. She believed the Hunter Biden story was false. And she's in charge of disinformation. You know, this is a dangerous precedent. It is a very dangerous precedent because it will allow can you imagine you get the next Republican governor, just in the hypothetical, let's say it is Ron DeSantis, and he puts Marjorie Taylor Greene in charge of the Department of Homeland Security's Disinformation Governance Board. Precedents matter. I've been saying this since I've been in politics in the 90s, that neither side seems to pay attention to the precedents they're setting. It's one of the reasons I thought the Florida situation, by getting rid of the tax district, wasn't wise, because it will inspire the left to start getting rid of the tax-exempt status of, say, Christian private schools that don't comply with their indoctrination agenda. Now, you can say they're going to do that eventually anyway, but they haven't. It's like the chicken and egg game the Democrats play with the filibuster. Well, the Republicans are going to get rid of the filibuster. We might as well do it, but they haven't. They haven't. By the way, they're not going to, as I mentioned yesterday or day before, they're not going to get rid of the tax district now. In Florida, they can't. Legally, they can't. But there is this obsession with disinformation. Keep in mind, going back to Barack Obama's day, Barack Obama hired Linda Douglas of ABC News. She'd been at ABC News. She was hired, brought over. She started essentially a disinformation office in the White House for Obamacare. She encouraged people to turn in their neighbors if their neighbors were lying about Obamacare. They wanted the emails, the email chains. They had an email address you could forward stuff to so they could debunk the lies about Obamacare. It was a big deal. She, by the way, left. They closed the office, and now she's back in the media at The Atlantic. This revolving door between Democratic administrations and the media continues to fascinate me. Rarely does it happen on the right. It happens so much on the left. I mean, what's his name? Jay Carney had been Time Magazine's Washington correspondent, became the White House press secretary. Shyla Murray, who is at the Wall Street Journal, became Joe Biden's press secretary. David Axelrod had been at the Chicago Tribune. It's fascinating, the revolving door. Nonetheless, what's going on here is important, and you need to understand this. It goes back to the Democrats unable to get the American support for Obamacare. Democrats constantly believe that it's the message, and they've got to work on the message, and that Republicans lie and people are stupid, which they are, and they believe the lies. And it's the lying, and they got to combat the lies that everyone would love their policies because they poll so well. Keep in mind, Obamacare never polled well. And they became convinced everyone wants this. It must be the lies. It's the disinformation. It is the mythology. Now, this will be a little repetitious for some of you, but I think we need to revisit this. It is fundamentally important that you understand what is happening here. 6,000 years ago. Yeah, we're going way back. 6,000 years ago. There was the Battle of Troy. Some believe it would have been 4,000 years ago. And Homer, it was an oral history. People talk about Homer writing his poem. Homer didn't write the poem. Homer gave the poem, and it was memorized by others, and eventually it was written down. And some of the details were so precise that archaeologists could uncover Troy based on that oral history that 1,000 years after the oral tradition began was written down. But they explain things as the gods overlooking the battlefield and having preferences. The Greeks explained the world around them with the development of the Greek mythology that the Romans then largely co-opted, changed the names, but most of it was the same. Do you know why the sun goes across the sky? Because Apollo, Helios, rides his chariot across the sky every day with the sun. And at night, his twin sister, Artemis, goes across the sky with the moon. That's why the sun came up and went down, and the moon came up and went down. The seasons were caused because Zeus's sister Demeter had a daughter named Persephone. Persephone was married off to Hades, the god of the underworld. And Demeter was furious that her brothers made that deal for her beloved daughter. Demeter was the goddess of the harvest. And so the deal was struck that during the summer, Persephone in the spring could come out of hell. And as Persephone came out of hell, all the flowers bloomed to greet her beauty. In the summer months when her mother was there and happy, everything was green and pretty. And in the fall, her mother began to despair because she knew soon her daughter would descend back to hell. And the leaves began to turn brown and die. And then Persephone would come, and her mother would turn her back on the world in those 3 months in despair, and the winter would come, and things would be dead because Persephone had descended back to hell. And that's how they explain the seasons. Every culture has mythology. Everyone believes some level of mythology. Atheists would tell you that Christianity and Islam and Judaism are mythologies despite so much history and eyewitnesses, which the Greeks never had. But the left has their own mythology. They can't accept that people are leaving them. For decades now, the Democrats have been told that they would be the dominant party. They believed the mythologies concocted in the past, that they would become the dominant party, that they would have a generational demographic shift in this country, a new coalition of Black and Hispanic and Asian and college-educated white people. They finally got that coalition, and turns out that no one wants to be in the same party with the Karens of the college-educated world. And so people are fleeing the Democratic Party. They can't believe it. Since Richard Nixon's reelection in 1972, it was the first time that it began to be uttered in the press regularly, demography is destiny. That's when the media began to predict the collapse of the Republican Party. In 1972, Richard Nixon's reelection was going to happen. For sure it was going to happen because the number of black voters in this country was rising. College-educated people wouldn't tolerate the party of Watergate. And yet it's never really come to pass. And even now, the Democrats tend to do better with the popular vote as progressives cluster in New York City and Chicago and Los Angeles and San Francisco. There are more of them than there are of us, but they've clustered together. And so the world that they exist is a world that doesn't actually operate here under the rules of the American Constitution. And their mythology now is that everything is delegitimized. There is systemic racism. The systemic racism is why the United States Senate exists, and it deprives them of the destiny they believed they had. And adding to this mythology as it becomes their secular religion, they add to it disinformation and misinformation. Everyone would like them if only those nasty Republicans stopped lying on Fox News. They've got ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS, CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the USA Today, the Chicago Tribune, the Los Angeles Times, the Miami Herald, every major media outlet in the country except Fox News and talk radio, and they're convinced it's all the lies on those outlets that they don't control that cause them to lose. It is the disinformation. It is their mythology. It is what allows them to explain what's going on to them without ever having to realize or accept that the public has turned on them. Nobody wants to recognize they've been rejected. So the Democrats have created this mythology of disinformation. And now to put in charge of it, the priestess who will now be in charge of disinformation, the Disinformation Governance Board, is a woman who believed that the Hunter Biden story was also disinformation, even though it was true. She believed the Christopher Steele dossier, even though it was false. And she sang erotic fan fiction songs about a 14-year-old boy. That's who the Democrats have decided will save them from disinformation. Maybe it's not the disinformation. Maybe it's them.